Welcome to the Placeholder Podcast Season 1, Episode 3, covering conspiracy theories and QAnon. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Placeholder Podcast, featuring Dan and Shane, aka Patrick, aka the moderator. Tonight's episode, it's going to be very special, and you're going to get a treat because this will be our very first quote-unquote serious podcast, because it is out there, but we're going to be talking about QAnon or QAnon, however you want to pronounce it. Definitely politics and all this wacky conspiracy stuff isn't really my bag, but it's something that definitely interests me, so I think it's a treat just because we all want to hear the surreal side of things, and all of us are doubters. So I think there's something in it for everyone. With that being said, let's bring in our Russian catchphrase for our Russian listeners. Podcast Zapunil Patrikam I Denim.
From my experience of Russian, that sounded fantastic.
Let's talk about conspiracies just in general, just as a warm-up. Do you got any favorites or any albums out there?
I wanted to ask you some of your favorites, because I know we talked a little bit about this in the past. We never really deep dived into it, more of a passing. I have a lot of favorite conspiracies. I really enjoy diving into these and just seeing how they work and how they spread. I really like. I think you first taught me about this one, but the cloning conspiracies.
Yes.
Can you describe the cloning conspiracies for our listeners?
Ooh, it's been a hot minute, but basically Illuminati's taking over. There's evil science taking around, and they want to spread negative messaging. So if you look at some celebrities, such as Miley Cyrus, a lot of the talk about her and conspiracy was that she had now joined the Illuminati, and you see that with her imaging. When she was on her Disney show Hannah Montana, she was very clean cut, kind of wholesome, and was not to put someone in a box, but a quote unquote respectable young lady. When she got the haircut and did the whole twerking thing, she got lots of tattoos, advocated drinking and drugs, and was surrounding herself with like a lot of questionable behavior. So people were thinking that the real Miley Cyrus is dead. She got replaced by an Illuminati clone. And then I think that also bridges on into lizard people.
Right. So the basic lizard person conspiracy theory, it actually has an interesting history, because there's some people who think the lizard conspiracy theory, the guy who originated one guy, I forget his name, but he wrote this thing, and there's certain people who think he was actually being satirical. He was basically writing what's the more classic Jewish conspiracy, but instead of saying Jewish people, he replaced them with lizards as like a hysterical literary device. And then, of course, some people took it very literally. Basically, the whole Jewish conspiracy was always the Jewish people are controlling the world through the banking apparatus, and there's a secret society of Jewish conspiracy, basically, to control everything in the world. All wars in history were the result of the Jews, the Jewish bankers, this Jewish cabal. And that basic structure for conspiracy theories hasn't changed in like over 200 years. Just who you think is the cabal or the Jewish people, the elites, changes. So the traditional one is the Jews control everything. Then the more crazy out there one is the lizard people control everything, or these aliens who have taken over mankind, elites control everything, or it's the Illuminati or Freemasons that control everything. They all follow the same structure. They all propose this elite group of really highly coordinated, nefarious individuals that explain away everything in history.
For our listeners, QAnon, can you explain what that is? I heard it had like an original history that was one person. It kind of turned into something bigger.
So what it is, it's conspiracy theory that evolved completely online. So do you know what 4chan is? What it is basically an internet forum that originated in the earlier days of the internet. And the whole concept of it is everyone who posts on this forum is anonymous. there's no like usernames or identification marks. On this board, someone who was calling himself just Q started posting these really vague, cryptic messages and claimed to be from inside the Trump administration at the highest levels. And he's called Q because Q clearance is arguably the highest level of clearance within the American government system, because the nuclear, basically the nukes are controlled by the Department of Energy, and their clearance code is Q. So if you have Q clearance, you have clearance to see all the classified information within the Department of Energy. So this is who this guy supposedly is. And basically he just releases these vague, cryptic messages on this message board that normally don't say anything very descriptive. Like a community of people have come around it to basically read into these, they call it crumbs, these vague messages it leaves on the message board, and they construct a political narrative for what's happening in the world politically.
Obviously, people have to believe some of them. So I'm just wondering, do you have an example of a famous Q drop or these crumbs that would get it? Because when you hear someone saying that they have government clearance on a message board, like something similar to Reddit, it seems very outlandish and far-fetched that there would be someone with that kind of clearance in the government wasting their time on a site just for kicks and giggles. So there must have been something that was close or resembled the truth, or maybe something that was vague enough where people could kind of attach two things together.
Right. Well, they're definitely vague enough that it's basically like a Rorschach test. You see the ink blots on a thing and you just see whatever your subconscious sees. And that's basically what this was. The narrative to explain like why he's wasting time on the board was that it's sort of this secret psyop. So this like high level way to present the real information to society, because the big news media was working against, were agents of the deep state. So in the QAnon, the big elite, I'll talk about structures there, the vague elite, they just call it the deep state. And they all lean into this vague narrative that I talked about with conspiracy theories. It's all, the elites are controlling everything. The media is corrupt and is fake news. There's like common elements that come out of it, and it sort of preys on a lot of people's preconceptions. They're like these conspiracy-minded people, preconceptions how the world works. It reinforces them.
Who's that guy's name? Nostradamus, kind of like that. Just vague predictions that will throw something out, throw enough stuff out there that's vague enough, and you can kind of interpret this text and any way you see fit. And you pick and choose which spots you like, and if there's something there that's close enough, you could hang on to those specific words and negate the rest. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what exactly were some of QAnon's biggest hits. The internet is filled with a whole bunch of savages, right? As soon as you get something wrong, people are relentless. So I think there must have been.
I disagree in these sort of things. Like,
okay,
I would compare QAnon basically as a cult in terms of how it operates, how it controls information. I don't think these people are deeply questioning it. Maybe I'm biased because I don't buy into it, but a lot of these people believe these things and they ignore the contradictions because they want to believe these things. A crumb Q said something along the lines, future proves past, which the community sort of took to mean Q releases a crumb we don't immediately understand. Whatever happens in the future, we can use to explain that crumb. So it's sort of like shooting an arrow against the side of a barn and then going up to it and drawing a bullseye around it. Do you know who George Soros is?
No, I have no idea. Let me know.
He's just he's a famous Jewish banker and Holocaust survivor who's like a billionaire, made billions of dollars through finance. These people believe George Soros funds literally everything they don't like. Okay. He's like the main proprietor of the New World Order.
Okay, and by everything we don't like, since these are Trump supporters, these are anything that would be seen as a detriment to traditional conservative values, or just in general?
Just Trump.
Just Trump.
A lot of these people hate all the other Republicans who don't fall in line with Trump. It's very, very Trump administration centric.
Okay.
And so the reason why QAnon is now so famous and sort of on everyone's lips is because of the insurrection that happened at the Capitol. Yeah, all those people, basically everyone you saw in video in the Capitol were QAnon people. And you saw them when they were saying things like, hang Mike Pence, who is Donald Trump's vice president. Why? Because he was admitting that Joe Biden won the election, basically. So he was betraying Trump and therefore needed to be hung, even though he's a super right-wing conservative politician. Anyone that didn't fall behind Trump in the election fraud scandal got immediately disowned by these people.
Pretty heavy stuff that they can take a whole bunch of things and make Trump to be, I don't know, more heroic and to really villainize those who oppose. Some of the stuff that you're saying, it's really comical, but difficult to wrap my head around because it's all specifically tied to Trump and they're not looking at a worldview of this. It's just kind of...
It's a very interesting relationship they have to Trump. Because like normally when you talk about cult leaders, the cult leader is actually the leader of the cult. Trump is the leader of this cult, but he doesn't know it. Like he doesn't actually interact with people.
Oh,
like he's always denied basically knowledge of Q and like hasn't really come out and like even talked about Q at all. And like I don't think Q, the guy posted on this message board that everyone reads deeply message, I don't think he's actually connected to Trump. I think he's just a delusional prankster. It has all the structure and the function of a leadered cult, but it's all just imaginary. It's people constructing this conception of what their leader is in Trump, seeing in Trump whatever they want to see.
Yeah, I think one of the points here that I see that you're trying to make is that Trump was the messiah figure of this religion that he's not aware of, or he refuses to acknowledge, which is...
But I want to go back to, so like, we've both been laughing at this a bit, and like you said, it seems comical, but it does sort of represent a certain understanding of reality that isn't fully incorrect. Like there are child trafficking rings and whatnot. I feel like part of the reason people do latch onto this conspiracy theories because the real world doesn't make sense. It's hard to understand. And people don't like the idea of things not being under control, of things just being chaotic and being impossible to understand. Like you look at academics who study society and they only talk about society in very abstract terms and they talk about structures and like different incentive sets. There's no real clear actors. Where conspiracy theories always have clear actors. It's George Soros. It's the bankers. It's this small group of elite people controlling everything. And that's reassuring because, hey, at least somebody's controlling it. This explains why everything's so shit. Whereas the thought of everything's so shit because everything's just so chaotic, it's sort of more frightening than a controlled dystopia. They get a psychological benefit from conspiracy because it provides them an understanding.
This was a conspiracy theory for Donald Trump. Now that he's lost the election, how does that fit in with the Q drops? Did Q predict? How has Q evolved now that Trump's out of office?
Well, it was pretty interesting following Q during the election because Q was 100% convinced Trump was going to win. This was hinted at in a lot of Q drops. Never in explicit terms, of course, it was Q, but everyone was assuming that Trump would win the election. So when Trump lost the election, it was, a big shock to the community. The way all these conspiracies do, they retro-explain, losing was always part of the plan. Trump is just drawing out the Democrats. He's luring them into a trap by making them do election fraud, and then he's going to prove that it's election fraud. Biden may have gotten this election, but he's not actually going to be sworn in. And I think the latest Q, I think it's actually the last Q drop, it always had to be this way. Different people are interpreting different ways. A lot of people thought it meant like, Trump was never actually intended to win the election, or something dramatic in the deep state happened, but the fight's still going on. There's still this war between the white hat high IQ internet lurkers and the deep state. It's kind of interesting watching it right now because I feel like the movement is sort of spiraling in all different directions, and there's no cohesive understanding of what actually happened with the election and where to go. But I think the larger phenomenon of QAnon, of people creating these explicitly political religion type organizations, these sort of political cults, I think that is definitely not going away. This will continue to grow, these religious things. QAnon, I think, really grew when COVID was peaking.
Okay, explain how. That's a very interesting statement. How did QAnon grow during COVID?
When things are going bad, and when large numbers of people have lots of like alienation and discontent, that's when people like search out sort of ways to understand why they're discontented, why they're alienated.
Yeah,
and
you're
you
vulnerable.
do this through both spiritual terms. So a lot of people, when they for like recovering alcoholics, for example, often will turn to religion as a source of strength and a source of dealing with their discontent in life. And it's same with these people. They're looking for meaning in their existence.
Yeah, people will latch on to everything, right, in a desperate attempt to make sense of the world. But it's just really bizarre when you hear things like this, right? I feel like people who would believe in this, I think there's a portion that would be weak of character, but some people are just probably looking into this just for the fun of it. And at some point in time, they forget that they're supposed to be in on the joke. It's
right. Definitely.
Yeah, I feel
would say most people who walk into this first, like, actually, I don't know, because I'm the like what you said. I look in this because I find it hilarious, and I feel like most people, that must be how you come by at least like the gateway conspiracies.
Yeah, you kind of take things in baby steps, I guess, right? And then eventually you find yourself in this grand illusion. I'm looking at at some failed predictions, and this is my theory on how people would be kind of rationalizing a failed Q drop. So when it says military parade would quote unquote never be forgotten, and it was canceled, right? I think when people see that, they go, never be forgotten. Well, Trump parade was never, and it will be forgotten because it was canceled. So you could kind of, oh yeah. You could kind of like, oh, I'll just subjugate this little sentence right here, and now it works, right? Even though that was not the intent, but
it's one of my favorite hobbies to try and follow some of these bakers' logic.
Has there been any Q drops that are like, okay, I could actually see that being legit?
Like I said, they're so vague that like some of them are just sort of truisms. I can't think of any different examples. Like, yeah, that's true, but also meaningless and trivial. I have not been convinced by anything I've seen in a Q drop or justification for a Q drop.
So truisms as in like something that applies to everyone. Like I guess like the big rune reading or psychic telling is you had an incident in your past involving water. Every single person, you or anyone you know, will have an incident with water at some point in their life.
Right. Or like the sort of fortune telling line, like you're the type of person that is very extroverted among close friends and in certain social environments, but other times you feel incredibly shy and isolated. It's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, right. Like
who isn't outgoing in certain situations and shy in others?
Let's take a look at the flip side of it. So, what's the biggest mistake, and what's the best recovery from that?
I read one today, which was explaining why Trump didn't win the election. And they're talking about Mike Pompeo, who was the head of, was it the CIA under Trump? But it's like this very strong Trump supporter. He made a line right when the election scandals were heating up. He said, Trump is going to peacefully transition into a second Trump term. That's what Mike Pompeo said. And the QAnon people originally they latched onto that. They're like, oh, right, like Biden is not going to be president. It's going to be a second Trump administration. Didn't turn out. And this guy went back and reanalyzed the quote and said, actually, you don't transition from a first term to a second term. You just stay in.
The way, like, all things internet, ads related and search history related is that when you look at something, you get more of what you see. And that's all going to fit in, right? You look for one thing, your search history recognizes it, and you end up going down these deep rabbit holes. All the social media platforms, they take that data and go, we want you to stay on this thing more. And I feel like with a whole bunch of stuff that's reinforcing you to keep on going down these rabbit holes, eventually something's going to stick. That's just kind of how humans are wired.
Like there's truth to all these conspiracy. Like they address a truth, but do it in an overly simplistic, wrong way. This is the thing about conspiracies, is that if they're real conspiracies, you don't fucking know. Who knows? I don't know who killed JFK or like what were the circumstances. I'm skeptical it was just one guy, especially when that one guy immediately got assassinated like before he could talk to anybody by another guy who is has all these nefarious connections to the mob and CIA. I'm willing to believe a lot of things that throughout history were actual like false flag attacks or misrepresentations, like propagandized versions of reality. Yeah. I believe CIA involved itself in sort of all sorts of evil MK Ultra, like secret, human experimentations.
I got one general overall one, and then I got a couple dumb ones that I'm a huge fans of.
All right, hit me.
All right. In terms of overall, I'm a believer because I'm crazy of predictive programming. So you see something on TV and media, and it conditions you to prepare your mind so you don't get overwhelmed by it.
100%. This is very much a thing, QAnon. Like, what are they preparing us for? Well, why do they need predictive programming? How ironic are you being right now?
I am being. I think when I got into this, I was being like, this is stupid. The Simpsons predict the future. They made a joke about Donald Trump being president. I think they did like a few times like that, and I was just like, you know what? That was predictive programming to get you mentally prepared that there would be a multi-millionaire reality TV show part-time actor being the president of the United States. That's the general one that I really do believe in. In terms of dumb ones, I believe that Michael Jackson is still alive. Okay.
Why?
I believe.
All right.
Okay. There's only so many albums you can make, and that's the whole reason why I'm there. All right. I believe in that. I can hear you laughing, you son of a bitch.
It's hilarious.
Hey man, he's the king of pop. He doesn't go out like that. If you watch some of these YouTube videos, there was a burn victim. That was one of Michael Jackson's best friends. If you look at it, I've seen a lot of burn victims in my life, but it looked like prosthetic makeup, and his eyes were the same, like, sad, aged eyes that Michael Jackson had. And so when I see it, I'm like, that's Michael Jackson in prosthetics. I'm gonna leave like this. Paris Jackson, that's Michael Jackson's daughter. Bless her in any single way, but she's in on the conspiracy too. That's all I got to say.
Is she in on it, or is her clone in on it?
No, Paris Jackson is not cloned. She's a treasure.
I'm sympathetic to a lot of conspiracy theories that don't involve the cabal and like supernatural elements.
All right. I think we went to our limit, so we kind of went side straight, but we got the power of editing with us. So I'd like to thank everyone and all our listeners for tuning in to the Placeholder podcast. Let us know what you think about QAnon and what is your favorite conspiracy. We'd be very interested to know in your comments.
Yeah, don't be shy with conspiracy. There.
Mm-hmm. And
the more crazy, the more fun.
And as always, as we sign off, this is the podcast Zaponil. Good night, comrades.
Good night.
Спасибо, что вы были сегодня с нами и слушали подкаст «Заполнитель». Мы надеемся, что вам понравилось наше шоу. Следите за нашим следующим выпуском и обязательно ставьте лайки, комментируйте, делитесь и подписывайтесь. До встречи!